The sun had barely risen, but the heat was already pressing down on Tyler, as if the world was squeezing the life out of him. The card table was small, the plastic pitcher cracked, and the pile of cups stacked in neat rows barely seemed enough to hold all the emptiness inside him. Tyler sat hunched, his small frame slouched against the milk crate, his hands trembling from more than just the heat. His heart raced, but not from the effort of standing there hour after hour, day after day. No, it was something deeper. It was the feeling of watching time slip away, slipping through his fingers like the ice that melted too quickly in the lemonade. His mother, Karen, was just 3 miles away, lying in a hospital bed, her life hanging on the edge of a knife. Each drop of sweat that soaked through his shirt felt like a reminder that she was still there, fighting, but no closer to winning the battle. Tyler wiped his brow, unable to push away the thought of her fading away in that sterile room, where machines were doing all the work her body couldn't. And it was all his fault. He should have known what to do. He should have been able to fix this. Instead, he was here, 11 years old, selling lemonade for 50 cents a cup, praying for a miracle, but miracles don't come easy. A few people passed by, eyes darting to the sign, some slowing just long enough to look uncomfortable. He could hear the words before they even left their mouths. "You're a good son," a man had said earlier, dropping 2 quarters into the plastic container. But Tyler didn't feel like a good son. He felt like a failure, a boy too small to fix what was so broken. In the distance, the grocery store's automatic doors opened and shut with the regularity of a heartbeat, indifferent to the child sitting in the heat, doing the impossible. Tyler didn't want to be here anymore, but he couldn't leave. He couldn't go back home and tell his mother that all he had to show for 6 days of sweat and heartache was a few crumpled bills and some loose change. "How much have you made so far?" Tyler looked up to see a woman standing in front of his table. Her shopping bags were heavy, sagging against her arms, and she looked at him with a quiet understanding that made his throat tighten. $14.75, he said, his voice smaller than he intended. She exhaled, and Tyler's stomach sank. There was no way around it. He had been out here for 6 days, and it wasn't even close to enough. "How much do you need?" she asked softly, his voice barely escaped him. 12,000. Every 3 weeks. The woman set her bags down, her face unreadable. She didn't say anything about how impossible that was, how a child shouldn't have to bear such a weight. Instead, she reached into her purse, pulling out a $20 bill. "Keep going," she said, her voice like a warm breeze on a cold day. "You never know who might stop to help." She walked away, and Tyler just stared at the money, feeling the sting of it more than the relief. He blinked quickly, fighting back the tears that had been threatening to come for hours now. He wasn't supposed to cry. Not here. Not when he was supposed to be strong. His phone buzzed, and for a split second, his heart stopped. Maybe it was the hospital, calling to tell him that his mother was. No. He shook his head. He couldn't think that way. Instead, he forced himself to stand up and stretch, trying to ignore the ache in his legs and the queasiness that had settled deep in his stomach. He made a fresh batch of lemonade, pouring it slowly into the pitcher, watching the ice cubes float in the glassy surface. The sweet smell should have brought comfort, but all it did was make him more aware of the helplessness that clung to him. He had tried, but it wasn't enough. The minutes stretched, each one an eternity, each second a reminder that he had failed, that he was too small, too powerless to save the woman he loved more than anything. He could hear her voice in his head, the way she had told him, "We'll figure it out," even when the stack of bills was higher than they could ever pay. But that was before her kidneys had failed completely. That was before his dad left, walking out the door with no warning, no explanation, just a quick kiss to her cheek and a promise that he would find someone better. Tyler glanced over his shoulder at the hospital across town, the one where his mother was hooked up to machines that kept her alive. He couldn't even get enough to cover one treatment. He had $93 total. That was it. "I can't do this," he whispered to the empty air. His head dropped, and tears began to fall. He didn't care anymore who saw. This was the hardest thing he had ever done. This was harder than anything a kid should have to do. The sound of tires on the asphalt barely registered until a shadow fell over the table. Tyler looked up, wiping his face quickly with the back of his hand, trying to hide the mess of tears he had let go. A man stood there, tall and lean, dressed simply in a plain black t-shirt and jeans. He didn't look like someone who would stop. Tyler wasn't sure why, but the man's presence made everything feel different. His eyes didn't look at Tyler with pity. They didn't look at him like some tragic story waiting to be fixed. No, they looked at him with curiosity, with something Tyler hadn't seen in days: hope. "Is this stand still open?" the man asked, his voice calm. Tyler swallowed hard. He didn't have the strength to pretend that this was all going well. "Yeah, 50 cents a cup." The man looked at the sign, reading it slowly, then glanced back at Tyler. "How long have you been out here?" 6 days. Every day after school and all day on weekends." "That's a long time for someone your age." Tyler felt a knot form in his throat. He didn't know what to say. "Not good," he finally managed. "I've made $93. My mom needs $12,000 every 3 weeks for dialysis to live." The man stayed silent for a moment, processing the impossible gap between the number Tyler had made and the number that would save his mother. Tyler could see the weight of it in his eyes. The man didn't say anything else for a moment. Then, he held out his hand. "What's your name?" "Tyler. I'm Blake. Don't forget to subscribe, turn on the notification bell, like, share, and let us know where you're watching from. Your support helps us grow." Tyler's hands shook as he poured another cup of lemonade, the glass clinking against the plastic pitcher. His eyes barely focused on the fluid as it spilled out. He could still feel the man's eyes on him, the weight of Blake's gaze sinking deep into him like a heavy stone. The sudden attention was strange, unnerving even. Nobody had stopped to ask questions like that before. "What's your mom's name, Tyler?" The question hung in the air, simple, yet it made Tyler freeze. The world outside seemed to blur as his mind raced. How could he explain this to someone he didn't even know? His mother, Karen, was his whole world, his reason for everything. But no one, except maybe his aunt, ever seemed to understand just how much she meant to him. And now here was Blake, someone he had never seen before, asking about her like it was a normal conversation. Blake's calm presence, his simple demeanor, seemed to pull Tyler out of his thoughts. The man wasn't asking out of pity. There was no judgment in his eyes. There was no trace of discomfort. "Karen," Tyler answered quietly, his voice trembling with something he couldn't name. Blake nodded slowly, the silence between them stretching just a bit longer than Tyler could handle. The warmth from the sun was oppressive, and Tyler felt like he was suffocating under the weight of his own hopelessness. "She's a fighter," Blake said, almost like he was speaking more to himself than to Tyler. Tyler's throat tightened, and he swallowed hard. "She's always been," he said, barely above a whisper. For the first time in what felt like forever, the weight of the world felt a little lighter. Blake's words weren't full of empty comfort or hollow promises. There was something genuine in the way he spoke, something Tyler couldn't explain. Blake glanced at the sign on the table again, then at the money Tyler had made. The numbers in his head swirled, the impossible math of it all weighing on him. "You've been out here for 6 days, huh?" Blake asked, his voice soft but filled with an underlying force that made Tyler nod without thinking. Blake wasn't looking at him like a kid trying to get by. He was looking at him like someone who had been through something similar. Like he knew exactly what it felt like to have the world feel too heavy to carry. "How's it going?" Blake asked, his tone not judging, just curious. "Not good," Tyler admitted, feeling the truth weigh on him in ways he hadn't expected. $93. It's not even close. Blake didn't flinch at the number. He just nodded thoughtfully. "That's a lot of lemonade. But it's not enough." "No, it's not enough," Tyler agreed. "But it's all I've got." Blake took a slow breath, his eyes locking onto Tyler's with a sincerity that made Tyler's heart skip a beat. "I've been where you are," Blake said, his voice steady. "I know what it's like to watch someone you love go through something so hard. But I also know that there are people out there willing to help. People who can make a difference." Tyler's heart pounded in his chest. Was he talking about something more than just buying lemonade? Or was he? No, he couldn't be. This was a stranger. Tyler couldn't imagine how someone would want to help him beyond just buying a cup of lemonade. And yet, there was a strange hope bubbling up in his chest, something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in days. Blake pulled out a wallet, a sleek, black leather wallet that looked out of place in Tyler's small world. He opened it and pulled out a black credit card. Tyler's eyes widened, confusion flashing across his face. "What's that for?" Blake held the card out, his expression unreadable. "Is there a billing department for your mother's treatment? Someone I can call to help pay for her dialysis?" Tyler froze. The words didn't seem to make sense, like a dream that hadn't quite come into focus. The idea of someone, anyone, actually offering to pay for his mother's treatment. All of it was so far beyond anything he'd ever imagined. It was impossible. You want to pay for her treatments? Tyler's voice was shaky, barely above a whisper. His eyes searched Blake's face, looking for some sign that this was a joke. But there was nothing, just quiet certainty. Blake nodded slowly, his gaze steady. Not just one treatment, Tyler. I want to pay for all of them. Every one. Until she can get a transplant or whatever the next step is. Tyler's head spun. He couldn't breathe. This couldn't be real. It was too big, too much for his mind to comprehend. But why? Tyler blurted out, his voice trembling with disbelief. You don't even know us. Why would you do that for us? Blake hesitated for a moment, as if considering how to answer. Then, quietly, he spoke. When I was 12, my mother got diagnosed with cancer. We didn't have enough money for her chemotherapy. We didn't have insurance, and my father was already gone. She refused treatment because she didn't want to leave me with the debt. She died 6 months later. Blake paused, his eyes darkening as he relived the pain. I couldn't save her, but I can save your mother. Tyler's breath caught in his throat. The man in front of him wasn't just offering money. He was offering something deeper, a second chance. Tyler's mind raced as the weight of Blake's words settled in. The loss, the grief, the quiet understanding. Blake reached out and placed a hand on Tyler's shoulder. I'm not doing this because you've failed, he said softly. I'm doing it because you shouldn't have to carry this weight. The air felt different after Blake made his offer. The oppressive weight that had been crushing Tyler's chest, making it hard to breathe, started to lift, slowly, but unmistakably. The sun still beat down on him, the heat making the concrete feel like it was melting beneath his feet, but it was as if a small breeze had found its way into his soul. Tyler glanced at the card Blake had handed him, the sleek black card sitting there, foreign and surreal. He didn't know how to process it, didn't know how to process any of it. Here was a stranger, someone who had no reason to care, offering him something that could save his mother's life. You're serious? Tyler whispered, almost as if saying it out loud would make it real. Blake nodded, his eyes never leaving Tyler's. I am. Tyler could hardly believe it. He didn't want to believe it, not because he didn't want the help. He needed it more than anything, but because he couldn't wrap his head around it. A stranger, a man who didn't know him anything. Yet he was here, standing in front of him, offering to change everything. Tyler's voice caught in his throat. He tried again, his words tumbling out. I don't know how to thank you. I don't even know why you're doing this. You don't even know me. Blake smiled softly, but it wasn't the kind of smile that seemed distant or condescending. It was a smile full of understanding, of knowing. I don't need thanks, Tyler, he said gently. Sometimes people need help. And sometimes, people with the means to help need to do it. It's that simple. Tyler felt the sting of tears threatening again, but he fought them back. He couldn't break down here. Not in front of this stranger. Not with everything still so fragile. Let me call the hospital, Blake said, pulling out his phone. We'll take care of it right now. You won't have to worry about this anymore. Your mom will get the treatment she needs. Tyler watched as Blake made the call, the calm and certainty in his voice making it feel like everything was falling into place. Like a door had opened to something that Tyler hadn't thought was possible. A lifeline. Blake was speaking with someone on the other end, giving Karen's patient information, explaining that he was authorizing payment. Tyler didn't catch every word, but he didn't need to. The reality was settling in around him, piece by piece. His mother would get the dialysis she needed. She would live. And Tyler didn't have to keep carrying this weight on his own. Okay, Blake said as he ended the call. It's all set. They'll take care of it. Tyler, your mom's treatments are covered. All of them. For the next year. The words hung in the air, too big to fully comprehend. Tyler blinked, his mind scrambling to process it. A year, he echoed, his voice barely a whisper. He looked up at Blake, unable to fathom the enormity of what had just happened. Blake nodded. Yes, for now, you can focus on being a kid again, on not having to worry about where the next dollar is coming from. Tyler took a step back, his heart hammering in his chest. He opened his mouth to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. How could he even begin to express the gratitude, the relief? How could he explain the weight that had been lifted from his shoulders, the burden that had threatened to crush him for days? Are you sure? Tyler finally managed to say, though he knew the answer. He didn't want to feel like he was dreaming, but it was too real, too huge. Blake smiled, this time with a warmth that Tyler couldn't miss. I'm sure. This is what I do. I help. I don't want you to worry about this anymore. Tyler's hands were still shaking as he gripped the edge of the table. He looked down at the empty cups and the crumpled bills in the money container, all of it now irrelevant. All of it meaningless. His mother was going to be okay. It wasn't just about the money. It wasn't even about the lemonade stand. It was about something deeper, something that had been gnawing at him for days. The feeling that he had been fighting a battle that no one should have to fight alone. And now, somehow, he wasn't alone anymore. Blake reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card, holding it out to Tyler. The card felt like an anchor in the storm that had been his life for the last week. Here, Blake said, this is my personal number. If anything comes up, anything at all, you call me. Don't wait. Tyler took the card, his hands still trembling. He felt like he was holding a piece of something that was too big for him to understand. Thank you. Tyler whispered again, his voice raw. Thank you so much. Blake gave him a small nod, as if the gratitude wasn't necessary. You don't have to thank me. Just take care of yourself. Take care of your mom. Tyler nodded, not trusting himself to speak anymore. His mind was a blur, trying to catch up with what had just happened. A weight had been lifted, but a new realization was starting to settle in his chest. He had just been given something precious, something he hadn't allowed himself to hope for. A future for his mother. A chance for her to live. Blake took a step back, glancing at the black Tesla parked by the curb. He didn't hesitate. He just gave Tyler one last look, and then turned to leave. Tyler stood there for a long time, staring at the card in his hand, still trying to make sense of everything that had just occurred. The day felt different now. The air felt lighter. The world around him felt like it had just shifted. Tyler's phone buzzed again, pulling him back to the moment. It was a text from his aunt. The hospital called. They said everything's covered. Tyler, what happened? Tyler stared at the screen for a moment, unsure how to respond. The words didn't seem enough. He typed back, his hands still shaking. I sold lemonade to the right person. And for the first time in days, Tyler let himself smile. As we proceed, don't forget to subscribe, turn on the notification bell, like, share, and tell us where you're watching from. Your support helps us grow. Tyler's heart raced as he walked away from the lemonade stand, the business card still trembling in his hand. It felt as though everything around him had changed, yet nothing had shifted at all. The world still buzzed with the normal hum of a hot summer day. People walking past, the sound of cars driving by, and the constant pull of the mundane. But inside, everything was different. For the first time in days, Tyler felt a quiet peace settle over him. It was like the storm inside his chest had started to calm, like the desperation that had clung to him had finally loosened its grip. His legs were still heavy from standing in the same spot for so long, but they felt lighter now, as if each step brought him closer to something more than just survival. Blake's words echoed in his mind, over and over again. You shouldn't have to carry this weight. I'm taking it off your shoulders. Tyler couldn't help but wonder if he'd ever truly allowed himself to believe that, to let go of the weight he had been carrying for so long. That he glanced at the sky, which was beginning to shift as the sun dipped lower. The world felt softer now, less like a burden, and more like something he could still shape. There was still so much to be done. His mom still had a long road ahead of her. But for the first time, he didn't feel like the only one who cared. As Tyler walked, his phone buzzed again. It was a message from his aunt. They're taking care of everything. How are you doing? Tyler stopped in his tracks, his breath catching. For a moment, he just stared at the screen, unsure how to put into words what he was feeling. What could he say? That his life had just changed in a way he never thought was possible? That a stranger had given him a gift so huge he couldn't even begin to understand it. Instead, he typed, I'm okay. Better. Thanks for checking in. The relief he felt was still so new, so raw, that he didn't know what to do with it. The feelings were there, bubbling just beneath the surface, but Tyler wasn't sure how to process them yet. The knot in his chest had loosened, but there were still threads of doubt, of fear, that hadn't unraveled completely. Back at home, Tyler could already hear the low hum of the television from inside the house as he walked through the front door. His mother, Karen, was sitting up in bed, a blanket tucked around her legs. She was holding her phone, scrolling through something. Mom, Tyler called out softly as he stepped into the room. Karen looked up, her tired eyes softening when they landed on her son. She smiled faintly, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Tyler could see the exhaustion etched in her face, the toll that the sickness and the treatments had taken on her. She wasn't the same woman who had once kept everything together, who had smiled through the worst days and made him believe that things would be okay. But today, she looked different. Today, she looked like someone who had been given a second chance. "Hey, kiddo," she said, her voice still weak, but warmer than usual. She reached for the glass of water on her nightstand, her hands shaking slightly. Tyler moved toward her, his heart heavy. But something else lingered, something he couldn't quite explain. A sense of peace, of being allowed to breathe, for the first time in so long. "Mom, he trailed off, unsure of how to say it. His voice felt thick in his throat. He had so many words he wanted to say, but none of them seemed right. None of them could fully convey what he had just been through. The relief he was feeling, the overwhelming sense that maybe, just maybe, things weren't as hopeless as they seemed. "What is it, honey?" Karen asked, her eyes searching his face for something. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't just asking out of concern for herself. She was asking because she could feel that something had changed, something beyond the obvious. Tyler hesitated. He could tell her about Blake. He could tell her about the stranger who had stopped, about the miracle that had happened. But what could he say? How could he explain something so big? "I think we're going to be okay," he said softly. The words felt foreign on his tongue, but as soon as they left his lips, he realized how true they were. They might not be out of the woods yet. His mother might still have a long way to go, but for the first time, Tyler truly believed they had a future. That future wasn't just about him trying to save her. It was about others caring enough to step in, to help when things seemed impossible. Karen's tired eyes softened, and a small smile appeared on her face. "What happened, Tyler?" she asked, her voice filled with the faintest note of hope. He took a deep breath, sitting down on the edge of the bed. He didn't know how to explain it. How could he explain the weight of the kindness Blake had shown him? How could he put into words what it felt like to have someone offer you everything you needed without asking for anything in return? Someone came by the stand," he said, looking down at his hands. "And they paid for everything. Mom, they're covering your treatments. All of them. For a year." Karen blinked, her face scrunching in disbelief. "What?" Tyler nodded, his heart pounding. "I don't know how, but it's taken care of. For now, at least. We don't have to worry about it." Karen's face softened with tears she hadn't allowed herself to shed in days. She reached out, pulling him into a hug. Tyler felt her arms around him, holding him tighter than she ever had before. He let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. For the first time in days, they were both able to cry. Not out of fear, not out of desperation, but out of pure relief. It was quieter now. The tension had lifted, but something lingered in Tyler's chest. Not a weight, exactly, but a new kind of stillness. The air felt different, and so did he. For days, he'd been running on fumes, barely able to keep his head above water. Now, he was floating, but not yet at peace. He had spent the morning at the hospital with his mother, Karen, watching as the nurses went through their routine, checking her vitals and adjusting the machines that had kept her alive. Every movement, every beep from the machines, felt like a reminder of what they had been through and what they still had ahead of them. "Mom, you're looking better," Tyler said, sitting beside her bed. His voice had lost the sharp edge of exhaustion that had clouded it in the days before. Karen gave him a weak smile. "Better? I'm just getting started," she replied with a tired but knowing glint in her eyes. There was something there, something Tyler hadn't seen before, something close to hope, but not fully formed. That he nodded, but inside, he wasn't sure if he felt the same. Sure, the financial burden was lifted for now, thanks to Blake. Sure, his mother was getting her treatments, but there was something deeper in him, something unsettled. He couldn't explain it, but he knew something wasn't over yet. Later that afternoon, as Tyler walked home, the world around him seemed different. It wasn't just the bright blue sky or the light breeze rustling through the trees. It was the fact that he had made it this far. They had made it this far. But for some reason, Tyler couldn't shake the feeling that something was still missing. That he had always believed that doing everything himself was the only way to make things right, the only way to protect his mother. But after Blake's intervention, something inside him had shifted. He hadn't just been relieved, he had been changed. And in the quiet of his thoughts, a part of him realized that the transformation wasn't just about getting his mother the treatment she needed. It was about him accepting that he didn't have to carry this alone. When he walked into the house, Karen was sitting on the couch, her face a little more relaxed, her posture less slumped than it had been in the past week. There was a calmness to her that made Tyler pause, but it wasn't the same kind of calm he had felt before. It was more like a quiet acceptance. "Hey, kiddo," she said, her voice gentle. "I was just thinking about something." Tyler sat down beside her, glancing at her as she turned to him with a contemplative look. "What's on your mind, Mom?" "I've been thinking about Blake," she said slowly, her eyes distant as she traced a finger along the armrest, "and about how he stepped in when nobody else did. I I can't help but wonder if there's more to it than just the money." Tyler felt a jolt in his chest. "What do you mean? What do you think makes someone do something like that? Just give away everything he has to someone he doesn't even know?" Tyler shifted in his seat. He hadn't really thought about Blake that way. To him, Blake had just been a kind stranger, someone who'd seen his desperation and decided to act. But his mother's question lingered, like a pebble dropped into still water. Was there more to this? Had Blake done more than just provide money? Had he somehow seen them? Had he recognized something that Tyler couldn't yet fully understand? "I don't know," Tyler admitted, his voice quieter than before. "But I know he changed everything for us. He gave us a chance." Karen looked at him, her eyes softening. "And we can't just take that for granted, Tyler. We've been given a second chance here, not just with the treatment, but with our lives. And I think it's time for us to really start living again, not just surviving." Tyler didn't know how to respond. The idea of living again, of actually letting go of the weight that had clung to him for so long, seemed foreign. But it also felt possible, somehow. For a moment, neither of them spoke. It wasn't comfortable silence, but rather the kind of silence that comes when both people are thinking about something deeper. Something about their future. Tyler stood up slowly. He didn't know what was next, but for the first time in days, he felt ready to find out. That evening, as he prepared for bed, Tyler's phone buzzed. It was a message from Blake. "I know this journey is far from over, but you've made it through the hardest part. If you need anything, I'm here." Tyler read the message twice before setting the phone down. He wasn't sure if he was ready to reach out again, but the gesture was enough. For the first time in a long while, Tyler felt a sense of direction. He wasn't alone. His mother wasn't alone. And maybe, just maybe, they could both start believing in a future that was still unfolding. Tyler closed his eyes, letting himself drift into sleep. Tomorrow was a new day, and it was the beginning of something different. The hospital had never felt so peaceful. The machines that had once beeped with an unnerving rhythm now seemed like a quiet backdrop to something more meaningful, life itself. Karen sat in the chair beside her bed, her hands resting gently on the blanket. There were no more frantic calls, no more rushed decisions or panic about the next bill that needed to be paid. The storm inside their lives had quieted, and in its place, a calm was starting to settle. Tyler sat across from her, watching her for a moment before speaking. The weight that had clung to him for so long felt like it had finally melted away. It wasn't gone entirely, of course. His mother's illness wasn't over. But there was something different now, something hopeful. "You know," Tyler said, his voice softer than it had been in weeks, "I didn't realize how much I needed this. I kept thinking that if I just worked harder, if I just tried enough, I could fix everything. But I couldn't. And that's okay." Karen smiled gently, her eyes softening. "It's more than okay, Tyler. You've carried so much, and I don't think I ever realized how heavy that was. I should have never let you feel like you had to do this alone. But you don't anymore, honey. We have help now. And we have each other." Tyler leaned back, a quiet sigh escaping him. He didn't feel the weight of the world anymore, not in the way he had. It wasn't that everything was perfect, it wasn't. But it was different. He had learned something. Something he'd never fully understood until now. He had learned that asking for help wasn't a sign of weakness, it was a sign of strength. The people who cared for him, like Blake, weren't there to fix things for him. They were there to walk with him through the struggle. And in the process, Tyler realized he wasn't meant to fight the fight alone. He had never been meant to. As the weeks passed, Tyler started to find a new rhythm. His mother's treatments continued, and she slowly regained her strength, her laughter filling their home once more. But it wasn't just the treatments that had changed them. It was the way they had both come to understand that the journey was never about facing it alone. It was about community, trust, and hope. One day, Tyler found himself standing in front of the same card table, the one that had once been his beacon of hope. The lemonade stand was gone, replaced by a quiet but important symbol of change. He had once believed that everything depended on his own efforts, but now he understood that sometimes The most powerful thing you could do was open yourself to others, to the possibility of connection and help. Blake had given him more than just money. He had given him perspective. He had shown Tyler that the world was full of people willing to step in when things seemed impossible. That was the kind of world Tyler wanted to believe in. A world that wasn't perfect, but one where hope and kindness could make all the difference. And as Tyler thought about the future, his future, he realized that he didn't have to carry the weight of it all on his shoulders. There would always be struggles. There would always be setbacks. But giving up was never an option. He had learned that sometimes, just standing still for a moment, asking for help, and letting others walk with you was the strongest thing you could do. Tyler's journey wasn't over. There was still much to be done. He was still a boy learning how to navigate the world, how to balance hope with reality. But now, he knew that strength didn't always mean going it alone. It meant having the courage to lean on others, to trust that when things got too heavy, there would always be someone there to help carry the load. That was the lesson Tyler had learned, and it was one he would carry with him for the rest of his life. As he sat down at his desk later that evening, Tyler pulled out the business card that Blake had given him. He had never expected to need it. But now, as he stared at the name, Blake Morrison, embossed on the card, he realized something else. He didn't have to keep this card as a reminder of someone who had helped him. He could pay it forward, just like Blake had done. That was the next step in his journey, and one day, he promised himself, he would help someone else in the same way Blake had helped him. He would be the person who made a difference, not just in his own life, but in the lives of others. Tyler's journey teaches us that even when things seem impossible, there is always hope. The real strength lies not in doing everything on your own, but in knowing when to ask for help and accept it. Sometimes the hardest thing to do is let others in, but it's also the most powerful. We are stronger together.